The city on the hill, manifest destiny, the frontier. These phrases were used for 200 years to celebrate the westward expansion of the United States. Borders were crossed, peoples were removed, and the phrases resounded with messages of inevitability, righteousness, and heroism. By the end of the 19th century, the continent had been conquered. Americans began looking for new borders to cross. European powers had claimed colonies for centuries. Now the U.S. embarked on a new era of expansion beyond its shores. Imperialism was added to the list of phrases. This is a story about how the United States expanded at the turn of the century, how it conquered distant lands, and at the same time conquered doubts at home. It is a story about wars, world's fairs, and the creation of an empire. The story begins in Cuba. On February 24th, 1895, Cubans take up arms to win independence from 400 years of Spanish rule.
Separation from Spain is the only cure for Cuba's ills.
A year later, and thousands of miles away, Filipinos rise up against 300 years of Spanish colonialism.
We sons of the people seek to redeem the mother country from the slavery of Spanish rule.
Spain now fights a war on two fronts. Cuban and Filipino insurgents are inspired by the Declaration of Independence and America's own history of revolution. But for 3 years, the U.S. government does virtually nothing, refusing to recognize or support these struggles for independence. Then, on February 15th, 1898, the cause of the explosion of the U.S. battleship Maine in Havana Harbor is a mystery, but newspapers, songs, plays, and films think they know who's responsible. 2 months later, President McKinley calls for U.S. intervention in Cuba. But the first battle of the war occurs far from Cuba. 5 days after McKinley's declaration of war, Admiral George Dewey defeats the Spanish fleet at Manila Bay in the Philippines. Dewey's victory, Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders, the Battle of San Juan Hill, the Battle of Santiago. These events come to represent a new status for the United States. America declares itself to be a global power. Independence fighters in the Philippines rejoice at the defeat of Spain. They assume the U.S. will be an ally in establishing a free and independent nation.
I hereby decree the object of the revolutionary government is to prepare the Philippines for the establishment of a true republic and to fight until all free nations shall recognize it.
But the United States does not recognize Philippine independence. America has other ideas. Europe had been claiming overseas colonies for over 400 years. In the 1890s, the last great land grab is on. The United States wants a piece of the action and needs to quell social conflict created by industrialization. The U.S. sets its sights on global economic expansion, especially access to China. On the home front, the United States sponsors 4 enormous international expositions. Emulating its European rivals, the American expositions construct a new image of the nation, suitable to the role of empire.
The great nations of the world, the United States is the youngest. Our resources are equal to those of any other nation. Our people are among the most intelligent, cultured, happy, and prosperous of mankind. The world's Columbian Exposition is the natural outgrowth of this nation's place in history.
These massive world's fairs promote industrialization and international trade. They also glorify Western culture and America's rise to world prominence.
Son, this is quite an education. It's like walking through all of the world's civilizations. I wish you could see it.
These buildings will disappear. This creation of art, beauty, and industry will perish. But who can tell the new thoughts that have been awakened, ambitions fired? In the furtherance of national interests, this fair is performing an important part.
Emma, you wouldn't believe the things they got here. It's a different world. At night, the buildings light up as bright as day.
To the Philippine people, as soon as the inhabitants of each town are free from Spanish dominion, the people shall assemble in open public meeting and proceed to elect by a majority of votes a chief of the town and 3 official delegates.
Filipino nationalists secure independence from Spain and set about establishing a new nation. No easy task given its geography and diversity. 7,100 separate islands and over 80 ethno-linguistic groups.
The chiefs of each town, after consulting the opinion of their assemblies, will themselves assemble and elect by majority of votes the chief of the province.
In the United States, Filipinos are presented only as children or savages.
To the Honorable Secretary of State John Hay, Washington, D.C., January 24th, 1899. There are approximately 20,000 American troops in the city of Manila. A number of war vessels are stationed in the harbor. A few days ago, a transport sailed from New York City with 2,000 troops. We are further informed that troops are under orders to proceed by way of San Francisco to the Philippines. It is naturally the impression of my government that these warlike preparations indicate immediate military operations aimed at the existing government of the Philippines. The Philippines are in a state of public order. They possess a government satisfactory to their inhabitants. It is my duty to request assurances that it is not the intention of America to make war upon the new Republic of Asia and that our liberties are not in danger at the hands of a republic whose name we have always associated with freedom. Very respectfully, Felipe Agoncillo, Envoy of the Philippine Republic.
President McKinley refuses to recognize Felipe Agoncillo or the new government of the Philippines.
I did not know what to do with the Philippines. I walked the floor of the White House night after night. I went down on my knees and prayed Almighty God for light and guidance. And one night it came to me. To give them back to Spain would be cowardly. To transfer them to France or Germany would be bad business. The Filipinos were unfit for self-government. There was nothing left for us to do but to take them, to educate the Filipinos, uplift and Christianize them.
The peace treaty with Spain faces strong opposition in the U.S. Senate. Then, on February 4th, 1899, tensions over annexation of the Philippines erupt in Manila. 2 days later, the Senate ratifies the treaty by one vote. Annexation and war against the Philippines occur almost simultaneously.
I have tried to avoid armed conflict in my endeavors to assure our independence, but my efforts have been useless against the American government. The people are strong when they wish to be so. Without arms, we have driven the Spanish from our shores, and without arms, we can repulse this foreign invasion.
Mine eyes have seen the orgy of the launching of the sword. He is searching out the hoardings where the stranger's wealth is stored. He hath loosed his fateful lightnings, and with woe and death has scored. His lust is marching on.
America's military action provokes immediate and sharp debate across the nation.
We protest, forcing our system of government upon an unwilling people. We protest the maintenance of a large standing army. We urge working men to awake and call upon their representatives to save them from the dangers of imperialism.
The colored people of Boston into their solemn protest against the unjustified invasion by American soldiers in the Philippine Islands. While rights of colored citizens in the South are shamefully disregarded and lynchings frequent, it is the duty of the president to reform these domestic wrongs and not to attempt to civilize alien peoples by powder and shot.
The policy of expansion is America's historic policy. We have annexed the Philippines exactly as we have annexed Hawaii, New Mexico, and Alaska. We cannot go back. First, for the sake of the islands themselves, and next, for the sake of our honor.
Just beyond the Philippines are China's illimitable markets. We will not retreat from either. Our largest trade henceforth must be with Asia. This question of acquiring the Philippines is deeper than any question of party politics. It is elemental. It is racial. God has not been preparing the English-speaking peoples for 1,000 years for nothing but idle self-contemplation. He has made us adept in government so that we may administer government among savage and senile peoples.
A republic cannot be an empire, for a republic rests upon the theory that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and colonialism violates this theory. We do not want the Filipinos for citizens. They cannot share in the government of our nation, and moreover, we cannot afford to add another race question to the race questions we already have.
I have been overflowing with wrath ever since the proposal was made to engraft our half-barbaric form of government on our new possessions. I have been studying how to save, not them, but ourselves from the disgrace. This is the first time the United States has ever tried to foist upon a people the exclusively masculine form of government.
In a sordid slime harmonious, greed was born in yonder ditch, with a longing in his bosom, and for others' goods an itch. As Christ died to make men holy, let men die to make us rich. Our God is marching on.
Debate over U.S. expansion and imperialism reverberates on the front lines.
Dear Molly, the Filipinos are keeping things stirred up as much as they can in the hope the anti-expansionists will win out. It would surprise you what a close watch these people keep on American politics. Every disloyal sentiment uttered by a man of any prominence in the United States is repeatedly broadcast through the islands.
One of the prettiest little towns we passed through is Malolos, with picturesque houses set off by tropical plants and trees. Most of the people living in Malolos desire peace and are friendly to Los Americanos. The 17th Infantry came into this place the other night and literally destroyed it, looted, ransacked, burned it. And we propose to civilize these people. We come as a Christian people and bear ourselves like barbarians.
To the President of the United States, we wish to state distinctly that our war is being waged in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. The intense and universal desire of our people for independence has been and continues to be the source of all opposition to foreign rule. The Filipino Central Committee.
Between you and me, Molly, I think we're making a big mistake in taking the Philippines. I believe it would be wrong to annex them if they wanted, and it becomes a national crime when we force them to become subjects. While the trade of these islands will be a commercial benefit, to restrain them can only be a source of national weakness. There is no saying where the new policy of expansion, which really means conquest, will end.
I am afraid that some people at home will lie awake nights worrying about the ethics of this war, thinking that our enemy is fighting for the right to self-government. They are, as a rule, an illiterate, semi-savage people who are waging war not against tyranny, but against Anglo-Saxon order and decency.
To the American people, we can repeat proudly with the firmness of one who carries the truth in his heart that our character and culture entitle us to independence. Why do you deny us liberty? Why are you fighting against the cause of independence, of progress, and of justice? The Filipino Central Committee.
Soon, we had orders to advance, and we started across the creek in mud and water up to our waists. We did not mind it a bit. Our fighting blood was up, and we all wanted to kill niggers. This shooting human beings is a hot game and beats rabbit hunting all to pieces. We charged them, and you never saw such slaughter. We killed them like rabbits, hundreds, yes, thousands of them. Everyone was crazy.
Step right up and see the real African life in a real African village. The most
World's fairs are not all grand buildings, fountains, and educational exhibits. There also is the Midway.
Only 25 cents. Visit mysterious Asia. Step into another
The
world.
Midway combines education and entertainment. The 1893 World's Fair sets the tone for all the fairs that follow. Harvard anthropologist Frederick Putnam cooperates with entertainment entrepreneurs to present living museums of humanity based on academic and popular notions of racial hierarchy.
See native habitats and customs. Hear the chatter of monkeys. See native dances. Only 25 cents.
Step right this way, ladies and gentlemen. A guided tour of the Midway, right this way.
The muffled beating of tom-toms, the shuffling of many feet, popcorn and lemonade, and thousands of folks who stare and gape at strange and fierce-looking Negroes and Bedouins.
There are 4 genuine foreign villages. The most novel is certainly the Philippine village, one of the most thoroughly native things on the street of streets. Please, do not pester the people, but go ahead and take pictures.
A man in a turban and red leather shoes strides down the street, and you feel with a sense of admiration creeping over you that if you were not an American, you would be a savage of that type.
Next, we will see the slant-eyed Eskimos in their sealskins. They are not quite as picturesque as the Indians, but they're living as genuine an Eskimo life as conditions permit.
Viewing man in his primitive state, black, half-clad, it occurs to you why you are the only race not on exhibition. The exhibit is for you, and you are the crowning glory of it all.
At the Chicago Fair, some African Americans and Native Americans refuse to be relegated to the sideshows on the Midway. They demand representation and seek to publicize their accomplishments in the main exhibit halls.
We American citizens of Indian blood most earnestly and respectfully petition you to grant us some recognition as a race. An Indian exhibit in the hands of capable men of our own blood would show to all races that our advancement has been greater than is usually supposed. Give us some reason to be glad with you that America was discovered.
Negro women of this country should have a creditable display of their labor and skill at the World's Columbian Exposition. Shall 5 million Negro women allow a small number of white women to ignore them in this grand opportunity to manifest their talent and ability? Ought not the work of Negroes be placed in the hands of Negro women?
The aged abolitionist and political leader Frederick Douglass agrees to speak at the fair to confront the public with the issue of racism.
Men talk of the Negro problem. There is no Negro problem. The problem is whether the American people have honor enough to live up to their own Constitution. We would like to tell our visitors that the moral progress of the American people has kept even pace with their material civilization. That American liberty is now the undisputed possession of all American people. That here Negroes are not tortured, shot, hanged, or burned to death merely on suspicion of crime and without judge, jury, or advocate. But nothing of this can be said without qualification and without flagrant disregard of the truth.
Segregation and racism in the U.S. Army present a dilemma for African American soldiers that Filipino insurgents exploit.
To the colored American soldier, do not be the instruments of the white master's ambition. Join the insurgent cause and avenge the blood of colored men lynched in the United States.
Some American soldiers, black and white, respond to the insurgents' call.
News Dispatch, The New York Times. 7 U.S. soldiers defect to join Aguinaldo's army. They claim the Filipinos are following the tradition of George Washington. News Dispatch, The New York Times. David Fagan of the 24th Infantry, colored, becomes a Filipino general and attacks U.S. cargo barge.
Every colored soldier who goes to the Philippine Islands to fight the brave men there who are struggling and dying for their liberty is simply fighting to curse the country with colorphobia, Jim Crow cars, disenfranchisement, and lynches. And as the Filipinos belong to the darker human variety, it is the Negro fighting against himself. Any Negro soldier that will cross the ocean to help subjugate the Filipinos is a fool or a villain.
News Dispatch, Manila Times. General David Fagan eludes capture, leads Filipino insurgents for second year.
Those papers and prominent citizens who said that the Negro was a fool if he espoused the cause of our government against the Philippines have proven themselves to be the fools. The strife is no race war. It is time for the Negroes to quit claiming kindred with every black face from Hannibal on down. Hannibal was no Negro, nor is Aguinaldo. We are to share in the glories or defeats of our country's wars. That is patriotism, pure and simple.
News Dispatch, Army-Navy Journal. General Frederick Funston claims to have the head of the infamous David Fagan. The U.S. deserter is said to have been betrayed by a Filipino for a large reward. News Dispatch, San Francisco Chronicle. Local bicycle thief takes Fagan's name.
By the 1900 presidential election, the anti-imperialist movement has declined. McKinley's victory over anti-imperialist William Jennings Bryan is interpreted as a public endorsement of expansionist policies. McKinley's assassination in 1901 and Theodore Roosevelt's rise to the presidency further consolidate expansionist forces.
The boys say that no cruelty is too severe for these brainless monkeys who can appreciate no sense of honor, kindness, or justice. With an enemy like this, it's not surprising the boys soon adopt no quarter as a motto and fill the blacks full of lead before finding out whether they are friends or enemies.
Although opposition to annexation has waned, the brutal campaign in Samar sparks a new public outcry against Army atrocities. The Senate conducts hearings to investigate the charges.
Were you present while any villages burned?
Yes, sir. I was present at the time one was burned, but I've known of as many as half a dozen being burned.
How large were these villages?
3,000 or 4,000 people. There was one which was burned with 8,000 or 10,000 people.
During your service in the Philippine Islands, did you witness what is generally known as the water cure?
I saw the Presidente, the head official of the town, taken and placed under a tank, and the faucet was opened, and a stream of water was forced down his throat. When he was filled, it was forced out of him by pressing a foot on his stomach.
What was the effect upon these natives of giving this water cure?
Their stomachs would swell up, and I've seen blood come from their mouth.
On July 4th, 1902, 5 days after the congressional hearings adjourn, President Roosevelt declares the end of the Philippine War. The U.S. government claims the war is over, but U.S. troops will continue to battle Filipino insurgents for another 10 years. After the Philippine War, the U.S. never claimed another formal colony, but America did not hesitate to use military force to further economic expansion. With the conclusion of the formal war, the U.S. government establishes a civil administration in the Philippines. At the same time, the government brings 1,200 Filipinos to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The 35-acre Philippine Reservation celebrates America's colonial possessions.
In view of the depth of interest attached to this new American possession, it is not remarkable that so many attend this exhibit.
I went up to the Philippine village today and saw the wild barbaric Igorots, who eat dogs and are so vicious that they are fenced in. They thirst for blood and are the lowest type of civilization I saw.
The Philippine exhibition presents the race narrative of odd peoples who mark time while the world advances, and of savages made by American methods into civilized workers.
The Philippine Reservation in no way portrays the life of the Philippine people, and it was never intended that their true advancement be disclosed. The impression has gone abroad that we are barbarians, that we eat dog and all that sort of thing. And no matter how long we stay here, we cannot convince the public to the contrary.